We're going to start, Mark, in the Premier League. Liverpool's defeat against Chelsea. If you were a Liverpool fan, would you be worried about what's happening at the moment, or is this just a blip?
No, I'd be worried. I'd be worried because I think even when they were winning games at the start of the season, there were obvious flaws in the games where you're thinking, well, they got away with it there. Now, obviously, Bournemouth, this game of the season, 2 up. Bournemouth led for 2-2 before Liverpool ran away with it at the end. Newcastle away. Newcastle out of 10 men, pulled a 2-goal deficit back before Liverpool won late on. So there've definitely been signs. And obviously, the Atletico Madrid game of the Champions League was very edgy as well. So I think what's happened the last week, it's the manner of the defeats as well. I mean, the Galatasaray defeat in the Champions League was probably a little bit different in the sense that it was a kind of a dubious penalty, but Crystal Palace away and Chelsea away, both very, very late goals, which is almost like Liverpool having it on the foot, really, because Liverpool have been winning games late. And I think the Palace win was deserved for Palace. I think Chelsea obviously edged it at the weekend. So, when they were winning those games, I did think that, it wasn't quite knitting together. And Liverpool were playing in a certain way that, for me, obviously last season, it was a very kind of a solid three-man midfield, and that was why Liverpool was so successful. They dominated teams in midfield, they worked harder than anybody else, and they had the extra body. Now, what I've seen of Liverpool this season, it looks like they're playing 4-2-4 because of the attacking players they've got. Whether it's Salah or Florian Wirtz, they're not dropping back and not doing enough for the midfield. So that 2 midfield is getting outnumbered. I think that's the situation, really. Arne Slot has got to find a formula to ensure that he can have his attacking players in the team at the same time as having enough people in midfield to avoid being overrun. I mean, obviously, Moises Caicedo had a fantastic game for Chelsea at the weekend, but still, Liverpool's issue so far this season and potentially going forward is that they haven't got enough in midfield to, I don't think, win the title.
I mean, I know that we did a kind of a preview pod, didn't we, at the start of the season? I certainly picked Liverpool to be champions. Obviously, they're going through a bit of a blip now. I think kind of the issues that they're dealing with are perhaps ones that were identified before the start of the season. Do they have enough in defence? Are they going to keep teams out? Is Florian Wirtz going to hit the ground running? Is Alexander Isak going to hit the ground running? In my mind, you would still expect players like Wirtz and Isak eventually to kind of get up to speed, and then that kind of takes Liverpool to a different level. I know that Arsenal are kind of quietly kind of built a little bit of a run themselves, but in your mind, Mark, are you still looking at Liverpool as a team to beat in a title race, or do you think that's flipped a little bit and now Arsenal should be favourites?
I did actually have Arsenal to win this title at the start of the season, so I'm going to pat myself on the head for that a little bit, and I still think that's the case. I think Liverpool have done too much in the summer. We're all focusing on the players they brought in, and they brought in, a lot of top quality players. Alexander Isak, Florian Wirtz, like you say, all these players. Ekatiké's had a great start, but we're not talking about the players that aren't there anymore. And for all the criticism that he had as a defender, Trent Alexander-Arnold was a massive part of Liverpool's game going forward, and also he wasn't as bad a defender as people said. He could do a job. So they've lost a real kind of asset down there, and I don't think either Conor Bradley or Jeremy Frimpong have got what it takes just yet to fill the gap. And obviously we've seen Dominic Szoboszlai's played there at times and he's done really well, but he's not a right back. At left back, I don't think Kerkez has settled in yet, and I think he's playing way too often in terms of Andy Robertson still available. Now, Andy Robertson obviously is a player that has served Liverpool well, and maybe he's not as young as he was, but he can still do a much more disciplined job than Kerkez. So you've got two issues. Both your fullback situations are all over the place right now. Defensively, they're not playing well. Van Dijk, Virgil van Dijk is like this untouchable god, isn't he? You can't criticise Virgil van Dijk, but there's been plenty of occasions this season where Van Dijk has been at fault. I mean, if you've seen the still for the Moises Caicedo goal, he turns his back and says, have a shot. So, Van Dijk, great as he is, great leader, he's not had a great season. Konate's not had a great season either. Mo Salah has not done anything this season in terms of, bringing to the table what he did last season. So there's lots of issues, and we're talking about the players they've lost. They've lost, Darwin Núñez brought a lot of energy to the team. Luis Diaz brought goals and energy. And obviously the tragic loss of Diogo Jota, who was a player that they could always rely upon to work hard and score goals. Now, the players that have come in are still finding their feet. And I think Arne Slot, last season, he did a fantastic job of coming in when Jurgen Klopp had left and there was a massive hole to fill in terms of his personality, his presence. But he did that in a way, he just kind of tinkered with the team but didn't do too much when he didn't have to. And I think the players, that was basically Klopp's team last season won the league. Well, it was because he only brought in one player, that was Chiesa, and he barely played. So Klopp's team won the league for Liverpool last season. But because Arne Slot left them to be Klopp's team and left them to win the league. This season, Klopp's team is slightly broken up a little bit. And his old stages like Van Dijk and Salah aren't playing as well as they have done. And it's difficult now. It's difficult for Slot to manage the transition, which has come a year late, and find, maybe this is, when Sir Alex Ferguson left Man United, his great team won the title in his last season and he moved off the stage. When David Moyes came in, the team had not gone over the hill a bit. Maybe that situation has happened now with Liverpool, that the great Klopp team had a great year last year under a new manager, and the new manager this season is going to find it much harder to get the best out of those players that he inherited at the same time as assimilating the players that he's brought in.
Obviously a bad day for Liverpool, but a good day for Chelsea and Enzo Maresca. I know that we were both at the United-Chelsea game a couple of weeks ago, and you didn't really get a sense that you kind of learned very much about Chelsea because of that early red card and the substitutions that Maresca had to make very, very early on. Maresca seems to go through this kind of roller coaster of being under pressure and then pulling out a result out of nowhere and getting lauded and then back under pressure again. I mean, where do you stand on Chelsea and what their expectation should be this season? Are you looking at title challenges? Are you looking at a team that just can't put the run of consistency together to get to that point?
Yeah, I don't think the title challenges, and I don't think they have the team and the kind of the cohesion. Or I don't think Maresca's a title-winning manager, but it's a strange season so far. So who knows? But I do think Arsenal are the favourites, and I think Liverpool and Man City probably together are the two teams that are most likely to challenge Arsenal. I think we've kind of overlooked City a little bit because of certain situations at the club and players that have lost, players that have come through. But Erling Haaland has stepped up a level this season, so I think City are real contenders. But Chelsea, you just don't know what you're going to get with Chelsea. They've got such a young squad that I think that kind of means there will be inconsistencies. Alejandro Garnacho's had a good start, but you can't rely on Alejandro Garnacho to maintain that good start and be consistent. They bought really well in João Pedro. I think he's a fantastic centre forward, but there's something about Chelsea I'm just not convinced about. And I think the game at Old Trafford kind of showed them in the best case Chelsea and the worst case Chelsea. So it's hard to see them challenging. But, what's your view on it, Rob? Obviously, Chelsea have spent a lot of money. They've brought players from all over the place and they've got about 100 players. But do you think they are a team that can challenge for the title this season?
Well, I mean, I don't think they're as far in their development as, say, Liverpool and Arsenal are, and I think that matters quite a lot. So when it comes to kind of March and April, when the pressure really starts to tell, I just think that Liverpool and Arsenal, possibly City, you mentioned there about Erling Haaland being on fire again, I think those three teams are more able to cope with that. I would have liked to see Chelsea properly in that game against United and actually had a proper look at them live to see how good they are, but they do just feel to me like they're quite inconsistent, that on any given day, they've got the players to beat Liverpool, beat anyone in the league, beat Chelsea or beat Arsenal or whoever. I just feel that when it comes to those kind of Saturday 3 o'clocks at Stamford Bridge, that maybe when you need that kind of little spark to get your team over the line, that perhaps they don't really have that, or don't have that enough to string enough wins together to get you in that title mix. I mean, you would expect them to challenge or be around the top four again. And I think having qualified for the Champions League last season, I think anything less than that now for Enzo Maresca would be quite damaging. I don't think that you could go back to being kind of a Europa League, Conference League side, even though the top of the Premier League is quite competitive. So in my mind, he has to qualify for the Champions League as a minimum. What they're able to do beyond that, I just haven't seen enough really to suggest that they are able to kind of match Liverpool and Arsenal and City in terms of consistency. And you mentioned players like Alejandro Garnacho. I would put, João Pedro, Moises Caicedo. They're obviously very, very good players, but are they going to do it 15 games on the bounce? Possibly not. They've obviously got an issue at centre half as well. The centre halves are losing them like nobody's business at the moment, and the decision not to sign another centre half at the end of the transfer window will probably come back to bite them a little bit, because I don't think you can go through a Premier League season with your fifth and sixth choice in that position. It's just the Premier League is too strong to be able to cope with that. So I imagine that Enzo Maresca, as good a result as it was against Liverpool at the weekend, will still be looking at his team and thinking, if we can finish fourth, that's probably a good season with the tools that he's got.
They've also not got a goalkeeper that you can say is a top class goalkeeper. I think Sanchez, as we saw at Old Trafford, he can make bad decisions. And I think one thing that's helping Chelsea at the minute is actually the injuries, because it means that Maresca's having to be a bit more consistent with his selection. So obviously, when you're losing your best, I mean, Cole Palmer right now, Palmer's probably Chelsea's best player, but he doesn't really fit into a system at Chelsea. And he plays well at Chelsea. in spite of Maresca's system, not because of it. And I think in the past he's had a bit of a moan power about the way that Chelsea plays. Certainly the Conference League final when he basically took it upon himself to win the game because he wasn't happy about all the sideways passes. So, Chelsea can't afford to leave out Cole Palmer when he's fit, but then when he plays him, does it upset the system? Because right now they've got wingers flying down both sides and it works, but that's the problem, that Chelsea got so many players that it can actually destabilise them when they get to the point where they have to have some consistency. But I think that, for me, there's definitely a clear top three in the sense of Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City. I think City will surprise people this year by really challenging. But beyond that, I think Chelsea are probably number 4 right now. Who knows about Tottenham? Who knows about Man United? It's been such a weird season so far. Newcastle as well. That Newcastle and United are both kind of hovering around mid-table. But if they began to get a bit of confidence, if United can somehow win back-to-back games, I know the next game is Liverpool away. So, well, United haven't won there since 2016. Maybe that kind of turn of fortune could come at Anfield, and who knows? I mean, maybe I'm kind of talking fantasy here, but if United got a result at Anfield, that would be back-to-back wins, and then who knows? There are enough teams that are knocking around that could get 4th or 5th place. I think there's definitely 4 or 5 chasing that. So it'd be interesting to see. But I think Chelsea right now are probably they're occupying that 4th spot of the best teams in the country, but they're not a title-winning side. But Rob, just while we're talking about Newcastle, they won yesterday, beat Nottingham Forest. So they won on Sunday, beat Nottingham Forest 2-0. Ange Postecoglou, 7 games in, no wins. How long do you give him?
Well, I think it's a really odd fit. I thought it was an odd fit from the minute that it was announced. It was obviously lined up well ahead of the official announcement because of the speed at which it was done. It's an odd fit, as many people have pointed out, that you go from Nuno Espirito Santo, who is kind of I don't want to say defensive manager, but is kind of defensively minded. And then you have someone like Postecoglou, who is kind of at his best, is an all-out attacking manager. That the switch between those two different styles is very, very difficult for any group of players, but particularly mid-season. I also think that the timing of it all doesn't help Postecoglou, because if you've got a new manager coming in, often a new manager coming in will replace a manager who has failed. And so you kind of come in on the wave of a little bit of optimism. That's not the case with Nottingham Forest, because Nuno did what he did with Forest last year and got them into Europe. Is kind of heralded for what he did at Forest. And now you've got Postecoglou coming in, kind of trying to build on that a little bit. And you're not coming in with as much goodwill as perhaps you are doing as if you replace a manager who has been sacked. On top of that, I also think that if you're coming in mid-season, it's a lot easier for a manager like Nuno to come in mid-season, because he is going to want to be defensive. He's going to want to be compact. He's going to want to stop goals going in and try and hit teams on the break. That is a lot easier to teach a group of players mid-season than, say, Postecoglou, who wants to come in and be immediately on the front foot. And he's talked about, the time it's going to take to kind of instill his philosophy into his players. Any manager coming in mid-season will tell you that. I just think it's a lot harder for a manager who wants to kind of move to a more attacking, expansive, forward-thinking style than it is for a manager coming in who wants to be a bit more compact. Now Postecoglou's in, I think that you have to give him time, because you could have seen all these things coming when he was appointed. You can't bring him in and go, I can't believe all this stuff's happened, and then sack him after 7 or 8 games, because that just doesn't make sense. You could have seen all this coming. Once you've made the decision to go from Nuno to Postecoglou, in my mind, and I know that I would always kind of veer towards giving managers more time than perhaps they deserve, that you have to say to Postecoglou, we're going to review it again in the summer. Like, let's see how far you get with this team. Let's see where we're at in the summer, and then take a view. To sack him after 7 or 8 games, after encountering problems that anyone could have predicted, seems strange to me. But it's modern football, so anything could happen.
Are we not always a bit bored with Ange, though? I mean, all he ever says after a game is, it's a fight, I'm a fighter, I'm ready for the balance, it's tough, I'm ready for the battle. It's like, well, he's making it a fight, because, like you said, he came into a situation where Forest had qualified for European football. They had a good start to the season. They won and drew the first 2 games. It wasn't like Forest had started the season badly. He's come in there in basically a dream scenario for a new coach and a winning team with a mentality of success, and he's turned it into a battle himself by, just having the wrong outlook for a team that is built on rock solid defense. So every time I hear him after a game, it's all about him. It's like, I'm a fighter, I'm ready for this. Well, it's a little bit tedious. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, don't turn it into a fight. Just just give your players the instructions that they need. Don't try and confuse them and try and get some results on the board. And the fact that the Forest fans have turned on him, they were chanting you're getting sacked in the morning during the Europa League game against Midtjylland last week. That isn't ideal, but the Forest fans aren't stupid. Football fans generally know what their team is about, and they know that they've had a manager basically parachuted in on the whim of their owner because he wanted, Ange Postecoglou, because whether it's because he won the Europa League last year, I don't know, but let's not forget, Tottenham finished 17th last season. Now, they weren't going to get relegated because the bottom three were so far away, but this myth that Ange Postecoglou had a fantastic time at Spurs because he left them with the Europa League trophy is nonsense. He had their worst season in Premier League history last year, and he got a job that he doesn't deserve to get on the back of it. He really doesn't deserve to be the Nottingham Forest manager because Nuno has done a fantastic job there, and he's been fired for all the wrong reasons. And they brought in a guy who's completely incompatible with the squad. So, Ange Postecoglou probably wouldn't never turn a job down, but he probably should have looked at it and thought, is that job for me? Is that job right for me? Am I going in there is my way of working the right way for that squad? Probably not, but he's taken a job. So I don't think he can have any complaints about what's coming at him right now.
So a bad day for Postecoglou, a good day for another manager who's been under pressure recently, Ruben Amorim, a relatively routine 2-0 win against Sunderland. What did you make of that? Obviously a bit of respite for Amorim after a week of which his job's been spoken about again.
Yeah, well, listen, it was a routine win, and that's what Man United and Ruben Amorim have been desperate for, a routine win, because all the wins so far this season have been dramatic or chaotic or anything but routine. So to have a 2-0 win at home, 3 successive home wins, it means that there is a bit of a positive kind of upwards trajectory now. It might not last, but the fact that they've got that result is fantastic. And I think, obviously, he made a big call with the decision to drop Altay Bayındır and bring in Senne Lammens in goal. And it was the right one, I think, I think we were at the game, the Derby game, the Man City game, and it was the first game that Lammens could have played. City gave a debut to Gianluigi Donnarumma, and he had a big impact in that game, but obviously Lammens didn't play. But you can't really compare Donnarumma and Senne Lammens. Donnarumma's a world-class goalkeeper, a Champions League winner, one of the best around. Lammens is a young keeper that is still learning his way, so to chuck him in at the Derby game would have been expecting too much. And I think Amorim's explanation that he needed him to adjust to his new club, his new teammates, his new surroundings, learn what was expected of him was the right thing to do. And I think, he could have played at Brentford last week, but probably good that he didn't, because I think maybe Amorim decided that the way that Brentford play, lots of long balls, lots of long throw-ins, it was probably unfair to throw in a young goalkeeper with that kind of bombardment. So Bayındır played, letting 3 goals. So Sunderland at home, a great way to start ahead of much more difficult test against Liverpool at Anfield next time after the international break. But Lammens looked solid. I mean, you were there, Rob. You were saying that the vibe around the stadium was just one of just a much more relieved atmosphere with a goalkeeper in the goal that was just not doing anything silly.
Well, yeah, I mean, he didn't have an awful lot to do. He's made 1 save from Granit Xhaka from a shot from the edge of the box, which is turned around the post. He's made 1 in the last minute with the game kind of already won at 2-0. The biggest cheers of the day were 2 deep crosses that get pumped into United's box at the back post, and Lammens kind of steps out, comes over a load of bodies and catches the ball. United have scored two good goals, but genuinely the biggest cheers of the day was for Senne Lammens coming out and catching those balls, which probably shows how starved United have been, or United fans have been, of a really, a proper, assured goalkeeper. At the end of the game, they were singing "Are You Schmeichel" in disguise, and often think that it's not easy for Man United players having all this pressure put on them. It perhaps doesn't help when the Stretford end is singing "Are You Schmeichel" in disguise as much as Senne Lammens, I imagine, loved it when he heard it. But it just shows, how maybe how low the bar is at Man United, that you can have a keeper who, really was competent on the day. That's all he was. He saved the stuff he was meant to save. He caught the stuff he was meant to catch, and all of a sudden he's been kind of carried out of the stadium as some kind of hero. It says everything really about the goalkeepers who he's taken over from. I think, like you said there, Amorim's played it pretty well with Lammens. He could have brought him in for the derby. He didn't. I think he won't say, or he certainly didn't say after the game, but I imagine he had penciled in that Sunderland game possibly as the game to give Senne Lammens his debut, because 3:00 at Old Trafford, if you're going to start at Man United, that's probably the time to do it. Obviously, it didn't help that Storm Amy's kind of ravaging Man United, Manchester at the time, and the wind and the rain probably didn't help him, but he dealt with that quite well. Obviously, you've pointed out there that there's an international break now, and then there's a massive game against Liverpool at Anfield, so you'll probably find out an awful lot more about Senne Lammens against Liverpool than perhaps you did against Sunderland, but a good start nonetheless.
I mean, you might disagree with this, but I don't think United had a goalkeeper that can catch the ball since Edwin van der Sar. And the point I'm making is that when David De Gea came in, he really struggled for his first 6 months. And throughout his time at United, as great as a shot stopper as he was never very convincing with the ball in the air. Corners, crosses. David De Gea was always hesitant coming off his line. I think it was an issue with the defence that they struggled at times to know what he was going to do. And obviously, the less said about Andre Onana and Altay Bayindir with the ball in the air, the better. But it's been one game, so I'm not saying that Senne Lammens is the new Edwin van der Sar by any means. But I think it's important from a defensive perspective that you know that your goalkeeper behind you is going to come for crosses and going to come for long throw-ins. And the game is changing now. The game is no longer one that's played on the ground. It's becoming much more direct again with long throw-ins, long balls, big cross into the penalty area. So if you're a defender and you know your goalkeeper behind you is prepared to come for those balls, that's a massive thing. It means that United can play 5-10 yards further up the pitch. It means that they can, just take a few more chances because they haven't been able to do that with Onana and Bayindir. And, for many times under David De Gea, there's the same situation. So who knows, maybe United have turned back the clock to the Edwin van der Sar years, not the Schmeichel years, and they've got a goalkeeper that they can rely upon once again to catch the ball when it comes in the air.